Hash-beaten until she forgot her own name and birthplace. A cowboy whispered hers back and gave her a new one, too. I said her name out loud for the first time in a barn on a Tuesday in November, with snow coming sideways off the Mogollon Rim and the horses shifting in their stalls. Said it quietly, the way you'd say a word in a foreign language you're not sure you've got right. Clara watched her face when I said it, watched to see if something moved. It did. Not much, just a thing behind her eyes, like a door that had been shut hard for a long time and the wind had found the gap under it. She didn't cry, didn't say anything, but her hand, which had been flat on her knee, curled in on itself, slow, like a leaf when the cold comes. That was the moment, right there. That was the one I keep coming back to. I'll tell you how we got there. My name is Eli Cord. I run a small cattle operation about 12 miles south of Contention in the country below the cliffs. Nothing impressive. 200 and some head, 2 hired men I could trust to do a day's work without being told twice, a house that stayed warm if you kept after the wood stove. I've been running it alone for 6 years since my wife passed. Not alone in the sense of no help, I had the men, I had a neighbor or two I could call on. Alone in the sense that mattered. Nobody at the table, nobody that the work was for. You get used to it, or you tell yourself you do. You fill the hours. There's always something that needs doing on a working ranch, fence that's gone soft, hay that needs moving before the wet gets in it, a heifer you've been watching because something about the way she's standing isn't right. You can fill every hour of a day without any trouble, and you can go to bed tired enough that the silence doesn't bother you. That's what I did, 6 years of that. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand what kind of man I was when this happened. Not a lonely man in the way songs make loneliness sound. Not pining, not drinking over it. Just a man who'd set his jaw in a certain direction and was walking that way. Practical. Kept his feelings in his chest where they were useful as fuel and didn't get in anybody's way. That's the man who found her. It was late October, first cold snap of the year, and I'd ridden out to check the south fence line where we'd had some trouble with a neighbor's cattle pushing through. I was maybe 4 miles from the house, in a draw where a dry creek ran between 2 low ridges, cottonwoods along the bottom with their leaves gone yellow and some of them already on the ground. I almost rode past her. She was in the cottonwoods, face down in the leaves, still dressed. That was the first thing I checked, because you think what you think, but her dress was torn at the shoulder and her left boot was missing, and there was blood in her hair, dried brown and matted. She wasn't moving. I got down off my horse and stood over her and put 2 fingers to the side of her neck and waited. Pulse there. Weak and fast, a rabbit's pulse, the kind that's using everything it has just to keep going. I rolled her over carefully, the way you turn something you weren't sure of, and I saw her face. She'd taken a bad beating. Not just once, the bruising had layers to it, old yellow underneath and new purple on top of the old, the way land looks after a flood, different colors of damage. Her lip was split and had opened again sometime recently. She was maybe 35, could have been younger, it was hard to tell through the damage. I didn't stand there and think about it. I picked her up. She weighed less than she should have, less than a person her size ought to weigh, and I put her across my saddle and held her there with one arm and led the horse back toward the house on foot. 4 miles took me most of the afternoon. I didn't mind. You don't think about your feet when you're doing what needs doing. My hired man, Tomas, was in the yard when I came in, and he saw what I was carrying and didn't say a word, just went ahead of me and opened the door and then went to get my neighbor, a widow named Frances Holt who'd been a nurse once a long time ago and still had the hands for it. Tomas didn't ask me questions. He was a man who understood when asking questions was the wrong thing to do, and that was one of those times. He just went. Frances came within the hour. She worked on the woman for 2 hours in the back bedroom with the door closed, and I sat in the kitchen and drank coffee and listened to the sounds through the wall, which weren't much, quiet words from Frances. Now and then a sound from the woman that I won't describe. Frances came out and washed her hands at the basin, and didn't look at me while she did it. "She's alive," Frances said. "She'll likely stay that way if she keeps still and doesn't take a fever." She dried her hands. "Somebody worked her over more than once. Some of those bruises are 2 weeks old." "Yes," I said. "She doesn't know where she is, doesn't know who I am." Frances folded the towel and set it on the counter. "She said something once when I was cleaning the cut on her head, said a name. But I don't think it was hers. The way she said it, it sounded like she was warning me." "What name?" Frances shook her head. Doesn't matter what name, that's not somebody you want to know about. I understood that. I said, what do I call her? Frances looked at me then. She hasn't told me one, I don't know if she knows it. She left and I sat there with that for a while. A woman in my back bedroom who didn't know her own name. Or had lost access to it, the way you lose access to a room whose key you've misplaced. You know it's there, you can feel the shape of it, but you can't get to it. I went to bed, I didn't sleep much. She had a fever for 3 days. Frances came twice a day. I brought broth when Frances told me to and stood in the doorway while the woman tried to take it and mostly couldn't. She'd look at me when I came in, not afraid, not exactly, but watchful in the way a deer is watchful, assessing whether the thing in front of it is going to move toward it. I didn't move toward her. I set things on the table beside the bed and left. On the 4th day the fever broke and she sat up for the first time, and when I came to the door with the broth she was looking out the window at the yard. Looking at the horses, specifically. One of my mares was out near the fence in the morning light, and the woman was watching her the way you watch something that you'd forgotten was real. She won't bite, I said. The woman turned to look at me. Her face was still bad, the swelling had gone down some but not much, and the colors were still wrong. But her eyes were clear. That was different from the days before. The mare, I said. She looks mean, but she's not. That's just how her face is set. The woman looked back at the horse. Then she almost smiled. I could see it try to happen and then stop like she wasn't sure she was allowed. I set the broth on the table. You should try to eat. She looked at it, then at me. Why? It wasn't a question, exactly. More like she was checking whether I'd have an answer. Because you've got a long road back, I said. Going to need fuel for it. She picked up the cup, took a small sip, then another. I went back to work. It went like that for a while. Days building on each other. She got stronger in the way things do when they've been closer to the edge than they had any right to be, slowly at first, then in jumps. By the end of the 2nd week she was up and moving around the house. Quiet. She stayed out of the way, which I could see was a habit, the kind of habit a person develops when being in someone's way has had a cost. She didn't offer her name and I didn't press it. Tomas called her La Señora Asterisk, respectfully, and looked away when she came near, the way a decent man looks away from someone else's pain. She started doing things. Small things at first. I'd come in and the dishes would be washed and stacked, or the wood by the stove would be restocked. I didn't comment on it. I didn't want her to feel like she owed me. But I noticed, and I was glad of it. Not for the help, I didn't need the help, but because a person who's starting to do things is a person who's starting to live again. One morning I came in from early chores and she was making breakfast. She had her back to me and she was working at the stove with the kind of focused quiet that meant she was concentrating, or that she'd learned to make herself invisible, and it was muscle memory by now. Biscuits in the pan. Eggs. She heard me come in and her shoulders went up, just briefly, that flinch that wasn't quite a flinch, and then she turned and set a plate on the table. I sat down and ate. It was good. I told her so. She stood at the stove with her back to me again and said nothing, but I could see her shoulders drop a little. Like something released. Frances came by about 3 weeks in and took me aside in the yard. She needs to know who she is, Frances said. Not knowing it's bad for a person, Eli. She's walking around like she's borrowed from somewhere and might have to be returned. I know it, I said. She doesn't know her name, or she's buried it. I've seen that before. A person buries something because knowing it is dangerous, because knowing it is connected to something terrible. Frances looked out at the mountains. But at some point she has to dig it back up. How do I help with that? I don't know, Frances said. Carefully talk to her, not about the thing that happened, just talk, ordinary talk. Let her get used to the sound of being a person. After Frances left, I thought about that for a long time. Let her get used to the sound of being a person. There's something in that phrase I've rolled around in my head many times since. The sound of being a person. I hadn't thought of it that way before, but when I did I understood what Frances meant. Not complicated. Just the ordinary music of a life. Somebody asking you to pass the salt. Somebody noticing you've done a good job on something without building a speech around it. Somebody using your name in the middle of a sentence. Not as a summons, not as an accusation. Just the way a name sounds when it's a word in the air and nothing heavy in it. I figured that was what she'd been missing. And for a while, what she'd been missing had included her own name. The sound of it. the ordinary neutral fact of it. So the name had gone deep, gotten tucked somewhere it couldn't be reached and therefore couldn't be used against her. A man would have to be patient in a particular kind of cruelty to take a woman's name from her like that, to go at a person until they buried themselves for protection. I didn't let myself think about it directly. It would have made me useless, and useless was the one thing I couldn't afford to be. But I held the shape of it, let it live in me as a kind of knowledge of what had been done and what it would take to undo. Ordinary things, Francis said. I'm a man of ordinary things by nature. I figured I could do that. So that's what I did. Or tried to do. Evenings, when the work was done, I started staying at the table instead of going to my chair. Nothing dramatic. I'd be going over figures or checking the schedule for the coming week, and she'd be in the kitchen end of the room, and I'd say something. Just whatever was in front of me. Going to need to move the cattle down from the upper pasture before the snow comes. Maybe 2-3 weeks. She didn't answer, but she wasn't not listening. That one mare, the one you watched from the window, she's about to foal. First time, she doesn't know what's happening to her, makes her nervous. Still nothing, but she'd stopped moving, standing at the counter with her hands still. Named her Cora, the mare. After my wife's mother, who was also nervous most of the time and didn't like being surprised. A small sound from the kitchen, not quite a laugh, but in that direction. I kept going, night after night, not pushing. Just filling the air with ordinary things, the weather, the cattle, the particular problem of a fence post that kept heaving out of the ground in the north field. Small, true things, the texture of a working day. Somewhere in the second week of that she said something back. I don't even remember what it was. Something about the fence post, a practical suggestion, actually, the kind of thing a person says when they know about land and can't help themselves. I looked up and she was looking at me, and there was a second where neither of us said anything. That's a good idea, I said. I'll try that. She turned back to what she was doing, but something had shifted. Some small wall had come down, or a window in it had been cracked open. About a month in, I came in from the barn one night and found her sitting at the table in the dark. Just sitting, not asleep. The lamp was out and she hadn't lit it. She was looking at her hands in the last light coming through the window, the gray-blue light that's neither day nor night. I lit the lamp without saying anything. Got 2 cups of coffee going, set one in front of her and sat down across the table. She looked at the coffee, then at me. I remember things, she said, but I can't, they don't have an order, they're just pieces. That's all right, I said. There was a creek. I remember a creek in spring. Cottonwoods, she stopped. Missouri, Kansas. She thought about it. Kansas, I think Kansas. That was the first piece. A creek in Kansas with cottonwoods in spring, that's what she had. That's something, I said. You can keep that. She looked at me with an expression I couldn't entirely read. Like she was trying to figure out what I was doing, what the angle was, what I wanted from her. I'd seen that expression before in the weeks prior. I understood it. I just waited. I had a name, she said finally. I know I had one. But when I try to think of it, there's just nothing, like trying to remember the color of a room you've never been in. It'll come, I said. What if it doesn't? Then we'll figure something out. I said it plain, just information. You're not going anywhere until you're ready, and you're not leaving without something to call yourself. She was quiet for a long time. The lamp made a small sound, the wick needing adjustment. I got up and adjusted it. Clara, she said very quietly when I was standing at the lamp. I turned around. It was Clara. She was looking at her hands again. Clara Marsh. I grew up on the Smoky Hill River in Kansas. She stopped. Something in her face was strange, painful. I don't know how I forgot that. I don't know how a person forgets that. You didn't forget, I said. You put it somewhere safe. She looked up at me. Your mind put it somewhere out of reach, I said. So it couldn't be touched. I sat down again. Now it's given it back. I said her name out loud for the first time that night. Or the first time as its own thing, not as information, not as an answer, but the way you say a name when you mean to let someone know you see them. Clara. She looked at me when I said it, and something moved behind her eyes, a door in the wind. She didn't cry. Her hand curled in on itself, slow, on the table between us. I didn't do anything about that. I just let it be there. After a while, she got up and went to bed. And I sat there at the table with my cold coffee and the sound of the wind outside and felt something I hadn't felt in 6 years, which was the knowledge that what I was doing mattered, that this particular life had weight. I don't know if that's a small thing or a big one. It felt large. In November, she asked me if she could start working, not outside. She wanted to help with the horses. I thought about saying no. There were practical reasons. She was still thin, still healing, and the work is hard. But I thought about what Francis had said about letting her get used to the sound of being a person. And I thought there are different kinds of getting strong, and maybe she needed the kind that comes from use. You ride, I said. I can or I could, she thought about it. I rode until I was about 16, haven't since. A pause. I don't know how long ago that was. It comes back, I said. Like most things. I put her with Tomas on the lighter work, checking water troughs, moving horses between pastures, the kind of thing that gets you comfortable in the saddle again without asking too much. Tomas was good with her. He'd worked for me for 9 years. He'd seen hard things and he didn't talk about them and he didn't expect other people to. Within 2 weeks she was riding like she'd never stopped. There's something about a person on a horse that tells you a lot about them, whether they're afraid of the animal or in conversation with it. Clara was in conversation. She had a quiet way with horses that they responded to, the way they respond to people who aren't pretending to be calm but actually are. My mare, the nervous one, liked her. I want to tell you about a morning in late November. The snow had come and the world had gone white and quiet, which is a particular kind of quiet that I've always loved, sound absorbed, edges gone soft, everything simplified down to what matters. I was in the barn before first light, doing the morning check, and Clara came in behind me. She'd been sleeping later since the cold came, which was right, she needed it, but that morning she was up early. She came in and stood in the barn doorway in the lamplight, and the cold was on her face, and her breath was visible, and she had her arms crossed against the chill. Just standing there, looking at the horses. I slept well, she said, like this was news, like she was reporting it, a little amazed. Good, I said. I can't remember, it's been a long time. She moved to stand beside Cora's stall, put her hand on the board, maybe years. I kept working, didn't make a thing of it. Eli, she said, and then stopped. It was the first time she'd used my name. I noticed it but didn't show that I noticed. I want to tell you something, she said. And I need you to just hear it and not say anything, not right away. All right, I said. She kept her hand on the board, watching Cora. I was married, she said. I don't need to tell you the rest, the shape of it, you know the shape of it. A pause. I had a daughter. She's alive, she's safe, she's with my sister in Abilene, and I know that for certain. The thing I knew well enough to get her out before, she stopped. Before? I kept my hands on what I was doing, kept the silence she'd asked for. I ran, Clara said. I ran and he found me, and the second time I ran he found me again, and the third time, her hand pressed flat on the board. The third time I woke up in a ditch. I woke up not knowing my name, not knowing where I was, not knowing anything but that I was cold and I needed to keep still because moving hurt. She took a breath. And then I woke up here. Outside, the snow was falling. You could hear it the way you hear nothing, the particular quality of silence that means something is absorbing sound. I'm not going back, she said. I need you to know that, whatever comes, I'm not going back to that. I set down what I was doing. Clara, I said. She turned to look at me. Nobody is taking you back, I said. Not on this ranch, not while I'm on this earth. I said it the same way I'd say anything else, flat, plain as fact. You understand me. She held my gaze for a moment, then she nodded, small, once. I went back to work. She stood there for a while and then she started helping. He came in December. I knew he'd come. There's no version of that story where they don't come. I was in the yard when I saw the dust on the south road, 2 horses moving with purpose. I called to Tomas and told him to go inside, and I walked to the gate and waited. You don't meet that kind of trouble by running from it or by retreating into your own house. You meet it standing in your own yard at your own gate in your own boots. There were 2 of them. A man in a good coat with bad eyes, the eyes of a man who's used to having things go the way he says, and a younger man who I could see was along for the weight of an extra body. They pulled up outside the fence. I'm looking for a woman, the first man said. My wife, dark hair about so tall. Cattle ranch, I said, just men here. His eyes moved around the property, slow and thorough. The way a man looks when he owns things and is used to assessing whether what he owns is in order. "I've got reason to believe she came this way," he said. "A lot of things come this way," I said. "It's a road." "I'd like to look around." I put one hand on the gate post, not threatening, just occupying the space. "This is private land," I said. "You've got no legal reason to search it. Unless you've got a paper from the county sheriff, which I'd want to see. You've got no more right to come onto this property than I have to walk into your house." His face changed, not in a loud way, in the way a sky changes before weather, a tightening. "She's my wife," he said. "You said that," I said, "doesn't give you search rights." He sat there on his horse and looked at me. I let him look. I'd stood in front of harder things than a man in a good coat with a young hand he'd brought along to make himself feel large. You can read a man in a few seconds when you've been reading men your whole life. I read this one. He was used to going where he wanted and taking what he wanted, and the thing that kept him doing that was that most people didn't want the trouble of stopping him. I wanted the trouble. "If you've got a complaint," I said, "the county sheriff is in contention, name of Harlow. I know him personally. You ride in and tell him your wife's missing. He'll ask you some questions. You answer them, and if he thinks there's something here worth looking at, he'll come out and look." I kept my hand on the post. "That's the lawful way." He held my gaze for a long moment. The young hand was looking somewhere else, which told me what I needed to know about his commitment. "I'll be back," the man in the good coat said. "You know where I am?" I said. They turned and rode back the way they came. I watched them until they were off my land. Then I watched them a while longer. Then I went inside. Clara was in the kitchen. She'd heard it, you couldn't not hear it. The yard was close. And she was standing at the counter with her hands flat on the surface, and she was white as the snow outside. "He'll go to Harlow," I said. "Harlow's a square man. He'll ask questions, and Harlow doesn't like men who can't answer them." I got a cup of coffee going. "And even if he comes back with paper, the woman on this ranch is Clara Cord, my hired hand, not whoever he's looking for." She turned around. "My name is Cord now," I said, flat as I could say it. "If that's all right with you, for the legal protection of it. It'd mean I was responsible for you in the way a man is responsible for his family. I want to be honest with you about what I was offering and what I wasn't. I wasn't offering anything she hadn't asked for. I wasn't making any claim on her. I was offering her a wall, the specific wall that is a name on a county record, a name on a deed, a man willing to back it up. In the West, in that time, that was the most practical shelter I could give her. Some men might have dressed that up, made it softer or made it larger than it was. I didn't see the point. She'd been around men who used words to make things seem different from what they were. I wasn't going to do that to her. What I had to offer was plain: my name, my land, my willingness to stand between her and the trouble that was likely coming. That was the honest inventory of what I could give. I gave it plain, the same way I'd give a man directions on the road. Clearly, without ornamentation, because that's how directions are useful. She stood there looking at me for a long moment. "Clara Cord," she said, trying the sound of it. "You'd keep your own name too," I said. "Clara Marsh Cord, it's just added, nothing taken." She looked at me steadily. That assessment was back, that reading of what I was, whether I could be trusted, what the angle was. I understood it. I'd always understood it. I just let her read. "Why?" she said, not asking for a reason, asking what I was. "Because you're a good person," I said. "Because I've watched you for 2 months and I know what you're made of. Because you're decent and strong and this isn't the end of your story." I looked at her. "And because I've got a name and a piece of land and I'm not using either of them for anything half as good as this." She stood very still. "I'm not asking for anything," I said. "I want that to be plain. If you want to leave in the spring, you'll leave with a horse and supplies and the name on a paper signed by me and Harlow both, so it'll hold in any county in the territory. That's all this is." I turned back to the stove to give her time. She didn't say anything for a while. I didn't push it. "Eli," she said finally. I turned around. "I don't want to leave," she said. She said it like she was admitting something, like it embarrassed her a little, like she wasn't sure she'd earned the right to say it. "I don't know what that means yet, but I know that I don't want to go." I nodded, turned back to the stove. "All right," I said, "stay then." Harlow came out 2 days later. I'd expected him. He was a big gray-haired man who'd been sheriff for 11 years and had the kind of eyes that look through things, not at them. We'd always gotten along. He had the directness of a man who didn't have time for anything else. We sat at the table. Clara sat at the other end, which she'd done herself. She wanted to be present. She'd told me, not hidden. I respected that. Harlow laid it out flat. A man named Voss had filed a complaint. Said his wife had been taken or had run. Said he believed she was on my land. "This is Clara Cord," I said. I looked at Clara. We hadn't worked out exactly what word to use. "She's been here since October, working for me. She came with a letter of reference from my neighbor Frances Holt, who treated her when she arrived ill. Frances can speak to her condition when she arrived." Harlow looked at Clara. "Mrs. Cord," he said, not challenging, just waiting. "I'm from Smoky Hill River, Kansas," Clara said. Her voice was steady. I noticed how steady it was. "Born Clara Marsh. My family can be contacted through my sister in Abilene." She set her hands on the table, folded. "I have never been married to a man named Voss." Harlow studied her face. He was a thorough man. He saw the remaining marks. They'd faded, but they don't disappear, and his face didn't change, but I saw something shift in his eyes, some quiet judgment being made. "Mr. Voss says he has witnesses who can identify his wife," Harlow said. "Mr. Voss can bring anyone he likes," I said. "Clara will be here, and so will I." Harlow nodded, took his hat off, and set it on the table. "I'll be honest with you both," he said. "Voss is a man with money, and he's got a lawyer in Tucson. He can make trouble for a while, regardless of what's true." He paused. "What's true matters to me, but in this territory the law takes time." "I know that," I said. "We're prepared for time." Harlow looked at me, something in his expression, not quite a smile. Respect, maybe, the kind that doesn't need to show itself large. "I'll need a written statement," he said to Clara. "Your full name, where you're from, date of birth if you recall it." "December 11th, Clara said. 1842, Salina, Kansas." She'd remembered more. She'd told me this the night before, quietly, the names and dates coming back like water finding old channels. Salina, December 11th. Her mother's name, her sister's name, the name of the schoolhouse where she'd learned to read. Harlow wrote it down. Then he stood, put his hat on, and extended his hand to Clara first, which was the right thing to do, and he knew it. "Mrs. Cord," he said, "I'll be in touch." After he left, I sat at the table and felt the particular silence of a thing that's been set in motion. Voss would push. There would be more visits, more trouble, probably a lawyer's letter. That was all right. I'd been in the middle of hard things before. I knew how to stay in the middle of them. Clara sat down across from me. She had a piece of paper and a pen, and she was writing something. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Writing to my sister," she said. "She'll know I'm alive, and she'll know where to find me." She kept writing. "And I'm asking her to have a document prepared in Kansas with a judge's seal verifying that I am who I say I am and where I was born." She stopped and looked at me. "I'm not going to be somebody who can't prove who she is, not anymore." I looked at her, the way she was sitting straight, her pen moving with purpose, her chin set. This was not the woman I'd carried out of a draw in October. This was not the woman who'd sat in the dark looking at her hands. This was Clara Marsh Cord, and she was writing her own name into the record. Voss came back once more in January with his lawyer. I met them at the gate again with Harlow, who I'd asked to be present. It was cold, bright winter morning, blue sky, snow on the ground, the kind of day that makes everything look clean and hard and permanent. The lawyer made his argument at the gate. Harlow listened with his arms crossed. I listened. Clara stood beside me. Beside me, she'd chosen to be there. I hadn't asked her to come out, hadn't suggested it one way or another. But when I'd gone to the door to go out to the gate, she'd put on her coat and come with me. She stood at my right hand and looked at Voss with an expression I'd never seen on her face before. Not fear, something past fear. Something that had been through fear and come out the other side with its jaw set. Harlow asked the lawyer for the documents he'd filed with the territorial court. The lawyer handed them over. Harlow looked at them slowly, the way a careful man reads things. Then he folded them and gave them back. "These documents name a woman called Hannah Voss," Harlow said. "Born in St. Louis, 1844, married to your client in 71. He looked at the lawyer. "I have a statement from a woman named Clara Marsh Cord, born in Salina, Kansas in 1842. The statement is corroborated by her sister in Abilene and by a notarized record from the Saline County Courthouse." He paused. I don't have a woman named Hannah Voss. I have a woman named Clara Cord. Until your client can produce evidence that these are the same person, evidence I can put in front of a judge. He's got no standing on this property. The lawyer started to say something. Harlow raised one hand. I'd also point out, he said, that I've received correspondence from the county sheriff in the district where your client resides regarding 2 complaints filed by women in that district over the past 3 years. I expect those complaints will come up before any judge I bring this to. He put his hat back on. You might want to mention that to your client. Voss sat on his horse and looked at me. That was the thing. He'd stopped looking at Clara and he was looking at me, and I looked back at him. I didn't have anything to say to him. I just looked. After a minute, he turned his horse and rode away, the lawyer following. Harlow waited until they were small in the distance. Then he exhaled, just a breath, but you could hear the relief in it, and turned to us. That'll hold for now, he said. He might push again in court, might not. Men like that, they need a target that'll bend. You don't bend. He looked at me, then at Clara. Neither of you seem to bend much. No, I said. He rode off. I stood at the gate in the January cold and felt the sun on my face and the silence on the land, and something that I can only call the feeling of having held a line that mattered. Not pride, exactly. Something quieter. The knowledge that when the thing came, I'd stood. Clara put her hand on my arm, just put it there. Not a squeeze, not a gesture, just her hand on my sleeve, warm through the wool, standing beside me. I put my hand over hers, let it rest there. We stood like that for a while, the 2 of us, at the gate of my land in the winter sun. And the horses moved in the field behind us, and the snow lay clean and undisturbed all the way to the tree line. And it was the most peaceful I'd been in a very long time. I want to tell you about the naming, the one I mentioned, the one I gave her. It happened in spring, March. The snow was gone and the ground was soft, and Cora's foal was 2 months old and testing everything, the way young things do, convinced the world was made for running on. Clara had stayed. We hadn't talked about it directly, hadn't put it into words with a ceremony, hadn't made a formal agreement. She was just there. She'd started sitting at the table across from me in the evenings the way she'd always done, but something in it had changed, some held quality was gone, some watchfulness. She was just there the way a person is in a place that's theirs. Her daughter had come to visit in February. A girl named Nora, 9 years old, with Clara's dark hair and Clara's way of looking at you straight. The visit was, I don't have words for it exactly. I stayed out of the way of it as much as I could, let them have the house, took myself to the barn when they needed privacy. But I saw them together in the evenings. Nora in Clara's lap reading aloud from the one book we had that was appropriate for a 9-year-old. Clara's chin on her daughter's head, both of them by the lamp. I watched them and thought, this is what I'm for, this specific moment, keeping this safe. Nora went back to Abilene with her aunt on the understanding that she'd come again in summer, that she'd come again as often as was right, that eventually, when it was time, there would be a place for her here if she wanted it. After Nora left, Clara was quiet for a day. Then she came and found me in the north field where I was repairing the fence post that had been heaving itself loose since October, the same damn post, and she sat on the top rail and watched me work. I want to ask you something, she said. Go ahead. When you gave me your name, the legal protection of it, she watched my hands on the post hole digger. Was that all it was? I set down the digger, stood up straight. The field was gold in the afternoon light, dry grass moving, the mountains dark blue to the north. No, I said. What else was it? I thought about how to say it plainly. I'm not a man who talks easily about what's in him. It's not that I don't have it, I've got plenty in me, I just keep it where it's useful. But she deserved plain. I wanted you to have a wall, I said. That was the first thing, but under that, I looked at her. Under that, I wanted you to have my name because I wanted you to be in my life. Because watching you come back, watching you find yourself again, was the best thing I'd been part of in a long time. Maybe the best thing I've been part of. I picked up the digger again. That's the honest answer. She was quiet for a moment. Eli Cord, she said. Yes, I said. You are the strangest man, she said. I've been called worse. I mean that as a good thing. She was quiet again. The grass moved. Somewhere out in the field my mare was grazing with the foal beside her, the foal still surprised by everything, still running at things to see what they'd do. I don't know what to call what I want to ask you. I don't have the right word for it, but I want. She stopped. Clara, I said. I want to stay, she said. Not because I have nowhere to go. I have somewhere to go. My sister would take me back. Nora is there. I could go back to Kansas. I could go somewhere new. She looked at me. I want to stay here with you because you are. She stopped again, and there was something rare and fragile about it, the way she was working toward the thing she meant. You gave me my name back, she said. You said it out loud and something came loose that I'd thought was gone. I want. She took a breath. I want to give you something back for that. I want to. Clara, I said again. She stopped. You don't owe me anything, I said. I want to be very clear about that. If you stay because it's where you want to be, not because you owe me, not in exchange for anything. I looked at her. But if you're asking whether I want you to stay, I want you to stay. She held my gaze, that steady, straight look that was entirely hers. Then she nodded, once. Then I'm staying, she said. I went back to work on the post. She sat on the fence rail and watched me work, and after a while she started talking about Nora, about Kansas, about the Smoky Hill River in spring when she was a girl, and I listened and kept working, and the afternoon went long and gold around us, and the foal ran back and forth across the field testing its legs against the world. We were married in May. Simple. Harlow officiated, Francis was there, Tomas and his wife, and Nora had come down from Abilene for a week. No church, no fuss, just the yard of the ranch in the morning light, the mountains in the distance, the horses in the field, all of us standing in the ordinary world which had turned, without my noticing exactly when, into the life I'd been trying to live all along. I'd put on my good shirt and Tomas had polished his boots and Francis had cut some early wildflowers from along the fence line and put them in a cup on the table outside. That was the decoration. The cup of flowers and the morning sky and all of us standing in the dirt. I wouldn't have wanted it any other way. Neither would Clara. I knew that about her by then. She didn't want ceremony. She wanted real. She'd been given too many performances. She wanted the ordinary, solid truth of a thing. Clara Marchcord. She kept all three the way she said. That was her choice. I liked it. It said something about a person, a woman who keeps her names, who doesn't erase the road that made her. When Harlow read the words and we said the words and it was done, Nora cheered, just outright cheered, 9 years old with no self-consciousness about it. And Clara laughed, a full laugh, not the careful almost laugh I'd first seen, not the guarded sound of a person who wasn't sure they were allowed. A real laugh, startled out of her by her daughter's joy. I put my arm around her and she leaned into me, just briefly, her forehead against my jaw, and I felt the weight of her. The solid, real weight of another person choosing to be next to you. That's the thing I'll tell you, that's the thing worth saying. In 6 years alone, I'd gotten good at not needing. I'd gotten very efficient at not needing things. And then this woman came, not asking to be saved, not grateful for being saved, but herself, her full self, choosing me the way you choose the thing you actually want, not the thing that'll do. Choosing me. I didn't know what I'd been missing until I had it. That's probably the oldest thing in the world to say, but there it is. It's been 11 years now. Nora lives on the ranch. She's 20 now, taller than her mother, with the same straight look and a way with horses that I think she got from watching Clara all those years. She calls me by my first name, which is right and how I like it. Some things don't need a ceremony. Clara and I had a son, named him for my father. He's 8 and he asks questions all day long, every day, questions about everything. How does the fence work? Why does the snow come from that direction? What are those birds called? Does the horse know it's a horse? We try to answer. We don't always have answers. He seems to find that acceptable. I'm 63 years old. My knees hurt in the cold and my hearing in my left ear is going, and there are things I can't do as fast as I used to. The ranch is sound. My men are good. My cattle are healthy and the land is in order, and I sleep like a man who's done his work. I sleep next to Clara. That's the part that still gets me if I'm honest. The plainness of it, she's just there. In the morning she's there before me, she's always up first. She's made the coffee and she's looking out the window at something. And when I come in she looks at me the way she's been looking at me for 11 years. The way a person looks at someone they chose and would choose again. I don't know how to tell you what that does to a man. You earn it and you keep earning it, that's how it works, I know that. She chose me and I try every day to be worth it. To be the man she chose, that's not a burden. That's what it is to be alive in the way that matters. To have a reason for what you do that goes deeper than just keeping the operation running. I found her in a ditch with her name gone. She found me in a life I'd gotten so good at that, I'd stopped noticing it was empty. We found each other. That's maybe the truest way to say it. In a draw in October with the cottonwood leaves on the ground and the cold coming and neither of us knowing yet what we were going to be to each other. I said her name out loud in a barn in November, Clara asterisk, and watched something come back to life behind her eyes. And she stood beside me at a gate in January and put her hand on my arm, warm through the wool. And in March she said I want to stay, not because she owed me anything but because she meant it. And in May we stood in the morning light in my yard and said the words and her daughter cheered. Clara Marshcord, all three names, her whole self. I think about that sometimes, what it means, a name, how it carries a person, how it can be taken. How it comes back when someone says it in the right way, with the right intention, in a barn in the snow. I've been a practical man my whole life, still am, but I know the value of a name now, the particular weight of saying a person's name out loud and meaning with it. I see you. I know you're here, you're real and you're worth knowing. That's what I said when I said Clara asterisk. She heard it and she came back. And she's been here ever since. And